Another case that we continue to follow. The medical examiner who performed Nolan Wells' autopsy, Dr. Stacy Turner, Mississippi's chief medical examiner. Oh, there's some questions. There's some questions in the Nolan Wells case. Here's a question that nobody in Mississippi's government seems interested in answering. July 2026, 18 years old, black football player, Southwest Mississippi Community College, by everyone's account, a lovely young man who had his entire history, or in his entire future ahead of him. His body was found in the water off Horn Island on July 4th. It was found in the water after a July 4th boat party with friends. He was the only one who didn't come home. I want to be at Barrier Island at night with no phone. That's a scenario that ends in tragedy without anyone doing anything wrong. We don't have answers yet. And the reason we don't have answers, the autopsy on July 7th, one day after recovery, she had everything, the intact airway, the lungs, the throat structures, the stomach contents, the best preserved version of the evidence that will ever exist. The independent autopsy performed 2 weeks later by Dr. Roger Mitchell, former D.C. chief medical examiner, funded by Kaepernick, came back undetermined pending investigation. Mitchell couldn't rule out non-accidental factors, but he also couldn't examine the air and sent preservation of evidence letters to the sheriff, the DA, the coroner, and the state medical examiner that same day. She's subpoenaing 5 tech companies for Nolan's digital record. She's building her own parallel investigation because the official one has given her no reason to believe it's working for her. 4 black families.
According to federal court records and reporting by outlets including the Associated Press and Mississippi Today, 6 Rankin County Sheriff's deputies were federally convicted in 2023 and 2024 for a January 2023 home invasion in which 2 black men were tortured and 1 was shot in the mouth. One of the convicted deputies, identified in reporting as Hunter Elwood, had previously been present at an arrest that resulted in an in-custody death. The Damian Cameron case, which Mississippi Today reported, involved a contested cause of death ruling.
Another case that we continue to follow. The medical examiner who performed Nolan Wells' autopsy, Dr. Stacy Turner, Mississippi's chief medical examiner, has a few skeletons in her closet. Ruled a previous in-custody death undetermined, despite her own findings documenting neck injuries consistent with deputy compression. 3 independent pathologists reviewed the same evidence, called it a homicide. A grand jury used Turner's ruling and closed the case. One of the deputies at that arrest, Hunter Elwood, was never charged. He walked free until federal prosecutors caught up with him and for something else entirely. Elwood was part of the Rankin County Goon Squad, a group of deputies who broke into a home, assaulted 2 black men, shot one of them in the mouth, and tried to cover it up. Federal charges, federal convictions, federal prison. Same sheriff's department, same deputies, and the medical examiner who helped them avoid accountability for the first death is the same one sitting on Nolan Wells' sealed autopsy right now.
In forensic pathology, once an autopsy has been completed and internal organs removed, subsequent examiners working on the same body have access to only what remains. According to publicly available reporting on the Wells case, an independent autopsy was performed approximately 2 weeks after the state's examination, conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, the former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C., and funded by Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights camp. Dr. Mitchell's findings, as reported by Mississippi Today and other outlets, came back undetermined pending investigation. He indicated he could not rule out non-accidental factors, but also could not access the airway or throat structures, which had been removed during the state's examination.
Credibility is going to be everything here. So I'm not saying that she got anything wrong. I don't believe she wasn't criminally found wrong with anything she did in the past either. It's just here's what happened, and here's the case that she was involved with, and here's how it turned out with the Goon Squad, and it doesn't look good. So I'm not saying that she did anything wrong here, but even if it was done by the book, perfect. She's the one, her office is the one who has the neck, who has the piece that nobody has the answer.
Dr. Stacey Turner has served as Mississippi's chief medical examiner. Her office performed the autopsy on Nolan Wells on July 7th, according to reporting, one day after his body was recovered. As of the time this podcast was recorded, her findings in the Wells case were not public, sealed as part of grand jury proceedings that, according to reporting, had not yet been formally scheduled. The question the host raises, whether an official with a publicly contested prior ruling should retain authority over a subsequent high-profile case, is a governance and accountability question, not a factual finding about this case.
Oh, there's some questions. There's some questions in the Nolan Wells case. Here's a question that nobody in Mississippi's government seems interested in answering. If the person responsible for determining how a black man died documented injuries to his neck consistent with compression by the deputies who arrested him and then ruled it undetermined, why does that person still have a job? 3 independent pathologists reviewed the same evidence and called it a homicide. It's not a gotcha. It's not inflammatory. It's a basic institutional question that any functioning system should ask, and Mississippi hasn't asked it, which tells you everything you need to know about the framework.
What is publicly established is that the Goon Squad deputies were federally convicted, and that Elwood, one of the deputies present at the Cameron arrest, was among those convicted. What remains publicly unresolved is whether the Cameron case itself was ever reopened, and whether any formal review of the medical examiner's office was conducted in its aftermath. Mississippi Today reporting has documented the Cameron family's attorney's efforts to challenge the undetermined ruling, but as of available public reporting, the case remains closed at the state level.
Part of it. And the system that looked at all this afterward and changed nothing, that's the framework. Nobody reviewed Turner's office after the Cameron findings. Nobody convened an independent panel. Nobody asked whether there was patterns in how deaths involving black residents were being classified. Nobody did anything. Turner kept her job, kept signing rulings. The next family that landed on her table had to decide whether to trust the process or find their own pathologist. Every family since has chosen the pathologist, and I can't blame them.
According to publicly available reporting, including coverage by Mississippi Today and local affiliates, Trey Reed's death was reported in late September 2025. Local authorities and the state medical examiner's office ruled the death self-inflicted. Reed's family publicly disputed that ruling, retained attorney Ben Crump, and commissioned an independent autopsy reportedly funded by Colin Kaepernick. As of publicly available reporting, the results of that independent autopsy have not been released.
September of 25, Trey Reed, 21 years old, black student at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, found hanging from a tree on campus near the pickleball courts at 7 in the morning. Mississippi has more than 650 recorded lynchings, the highest number in American history. That's not ancient history being invoked for dramatic effect. That's the context a black family processes when they're told their son was found hanging from a tree in Mississippi, and the state ruled it self-inflicted.
This is one of the most carefully worded passages in the episode, and it is worth noting precisely because it models what responsible commentary on an active case looks like. The host is not asserting a conclusion about Wells's death. He is arguing that a pattern of institutional conduct, documented through federal convictions, publicly contested forensic rulings, and the absence of any formal accountability review, has created a trust environment in which the official findings, whatever they are, will not be accepted by the Wells family or much of the public.
I need to say that plainly because sometimes when people hear Mississippi and black families not trusting the system, they file it under history. They picture fire hoses and lunch counters, and a world that doesn't exist anymore. Damian Cameron was 2021. Trey Reed was 2025. Nolan Wells is right now. The Goon Squad federal torture convictions were 2024. The framework that failed Damian Cameron's family is the same framework handling Nolan Wells' case. Same state, same institution, same patterns. Different decades, same results. And look, I'm not here to say that anything happened to Nolan Wells that was criminal. We don't know. We don't know the answer to that question yet. It could have.
According to reporting by Mississippi Today, Locks, and other Mississippi outlets, Nolan Wells, 18, was reported missing after a July 4th gathering on Horn Island, Mississippi, near the Gulf Coast. His body was subsequently recovered. His friends told investigators, according to reporting, that he chose to remain behind on the island to speak with a young woman. Investigators reported, according to public statements, that there was alcohol consumption at the gathering. The cause of death is, as of available reporting, sealed inside grand jury proceedings. No cause of death has been made public.
July 2026, 18 years old, black football player, Southwest Mississippi Community College, by everyone's account, a lovely young man who had his entire history, or in his entire future, ahead of him. His body was found in the water off Horn Island on July 4th. It was found in the water after a July 4th boat party with friends. He was the only one who didn't come home. I want to be clear about something. We don't know what happened to Nolan Wells. We don't know if his death was accidental. We don't know if it wasn't. His friends say he chose to stay behind on the island to talk to a girl, and maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Witnesses reported heavy drinking on the island. Maybe he was intoxicated. It ended up in the water alone, 8 miles from shore on an uninhabited barrier island at night with no phone. That's a scenario that ends in tragedy.
This sequencing is a matter of forensic procedure, not accusation. In standard practice, the first pathologist to examine a body has access to evidence that degrades or is removed during examination. According to reporting on this case, the state's toxicology results were not provided to Dr. Mitchell during his examination. Neither the state's cause of death finding nor Mitchell's independent finding has been publicly released as of available reporting. The DA's office, according to reporting, has sealed all autopsy results pending a grand jury that has not been publicly scheduled. The Wells family's attorney, Ben Crump, has publicly called for transparency and release of results.
Is that the institution responsible for providing them has sealed the results behind a grand jury it hasn't scheduled. In a state where the medical examiner's track record is already under fire, overseen by a DA who won't set a timeline and a governor who's more interested in attacking the family's attorney than demanding transparency. Dr. Turner performed Nolan's autopsy on July 7th, one day after recovery. She had everything: the intact airway, the lungs, the throat structures, the stomach contents, the best preserved version of the evidence that will ever exist. The independent autopsy performed 2 weeks later by Dr. Roger Mitchell, former D.C. chief medical examiner funded by Kaepernick, came back undetermined pending investigation. Mitchell couldn't rule out non-accidental factors, but he also couldn't examine the airway, the lungs, or the throat because the state had already removed it. The state's toxology was never shared with him.
Ben Crump is a Florida-based civil rights attorney who has represented families in numerous nationally prominent cases. His involvement in a case is a public fact in each of the 3 cases named.
And look, the reality is, just because Ben Crump connects himself to a case doesn't mean there's something criminal. Ben Crump will attach himself to a case that he thinks is going to get a lot of attention. That's what he does. There's been many like him in history. He's from a long line of folks of that nature. So here's the argument, and I want to make it as clearly as I can. I'm not accusing Dr. Stacey Turner of doing anything wrong in Nolan Wells' case. I don't know what her autopsy found. Nobody outside the DA's office does. It's entirely possible that her findings are scientifically flawless, that the toxology, the tissue analysis, and the cause of death determination are exactly what the evidence supports. And it won't matter.
The argument being made is structural, about the conditions under which official findings are or are not trusted, and it is an argument this narration can represent fairly because it is framed in exactly those terms by the speaker.
Exactly what the evidence supports, and it won't matter. Because even a perfect autopsy from this office in this state, inside this framework, will not be believed. Not by the Wells family, not by Ben Crump, not by the public watching this case. And it's not the family's fault. That is the system's fault. The system built this credibility problem by failing to act when the Cameron case exposed it. 3 national pathologists said your office got it wrong. A deputy your ruling helped walk free is now in federal prison for torturing people, and you challenged nothing. No review, no independent panel, no accountability. You just kept going and expected the next family to trust you. Come.
The Mississippi governor's public comments about this case and about attorney Ben Crump have been reported by Mississippi Today and other outlets. The host's account of the sheriff's early public statement, characterizing the death as not involving foul play before forensic results were available, is consistent with reporting on public statements made by local law enforcement in the days following Nolan Wells's death. The DA's decision to convene a grand jury and seal results pending that process is a documented procedural choice, confirmed in reporting. Grand juries are a standard mechanism in criminal investigations, and prosecutors are not required to set or announce timelines publicly.
One medical examiner, not one sheriff, not one DA. The framework, a sheriff who calls it no foul play within an hour of recovering a body before the autopsy or the toxology exists. A DA who seals the results and won't set a date for the grand jury. A medical examiner whose most high-profile prior ruling was contradicted by 3 independent experts and who was never reviewed for it. A governor who responds to a grieving family's demand for transparency by accusing their attorney of stoking division.
According to reporting by Mississippi Today and Ben Crump's public statements, Christine Wells Wansley retained independent legal counsel and initiated parallel evidentiary preservation efforts within days of her son's death. The subpoenas to technology companies seeking digital records, including Snapchat and other platform data, have been publicly confirmed. The host closes the episode by noting that 4 black families in Mississippi are conducting their own parallel investigations because, in his framing, the official framework has given them no reason to trust it.
Family that hires their own pathologist and retains their own attorney is telling you exactly that. Damian Cameron's mother hoped the autopsy would reveal what happened to her son. She got undetermined, while 3 independent experts said homicide. The Trey Reed's family learned more about their son's death from the news than from the people who found him. Christine Wells Wansley buried her 18-year-old son on July 20th. And sent preservation of evidence letters to the sheriff, the DA, the coroner, and the state medical examiner that same day. She's subpoenaing 5 tech companies for Nolan's digital record. She's building her own parallel investigation because the official one has given her no reason to believe it's working for her. 4 black families in Mississippi are looking for their own answers, not because they wanted to, because the framework that was supposed to deliver those answers has a track record that makes trust impossible.
Nolan Wells was 18 years old, a black football player at Southwest Mississippi Community College, when he died on or around July 4, 2025, according to reporting by Mississippi Today, Looks, and other regional outlets. He was among a group attending a boat party on Horn Island, an uninhabited barrier island approximately 8 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. According to accounts reported from his friends and described by investigators, Wells remained behind on the island while others departed. His body was recovered from the water off Horn Island on July 6th, according to available reporting. He was the only person from the group who did not return. His mother, Christine Wells Wansley, buried her son on July 20th and, according to public statements and reporting, sent preservation of evidence letters to the Harrison County Sheriff's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the Coroner, and the State Medical Examiner's Office the same day. She subsequently retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump and initiated subpoenas to 5 technology companies seeking her son's digital records, including social media and messaging platform data. The state autopsy was performed by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office on July 7th, 1 day after body recovery, according to reporting. An independent autopsy commissioned by the family and reportedly funded by Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights camp was performed approximately 2 weeks later by Dr. Roger Mitchell, the former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C. Dr. Mitchell's findings were reported as undetermined pending investigation. According to reporting and statements made publicly by the family's legal team, Mitchell could not access the intact airway, lungs, or throat structures which had been removed during the state's prior examination, and the state's toxicology results were not shared with him. The state's cause of death determination has not been publicly released. Those results are sealed pending grand jury proceedings that, as of available reporting at the time of this podcast, had not been publicly scheduled. No charges have been filed in connection with Nolan Wells's death. No individual has been identified publicly as a suspect by investigators. The investigation remains active and unresolved. The central institutional concern raised throughout this episode involves Mississippi Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Stacey Turner and a prior case in which her office's ruling was publicly contested. In 2021, Damian Cameron, a black man, died in the custody of Rankin County Sheriff's deputies. According to reporting by Mississippi Today and others, Dr. Turner's office ruled his death undetermined. According to the same reporting, 3 independent pathologists subsequently reviewed the same evidence and concluded that the death should be classified as a homicide. Citing internal neck injuries, the reports described as consistent with compressive force applied by deputies during the arrest. A grand jury, according to reporting, used the official undetermined ruling and closed the case. One of the deputies present at Cameron's arrest, identified in federal court records and reporting as Hunter Elwood, was never charged in connection with Cameron's death. He was, however, later federally convicted in connection with the Rankin County Goon Squad case, a separate and fully adjudicated matter in which 6 Rankin County Sheriff's deputies were convicted on federal charges stemming from a January 2023 home invasion during which 2 black men were tortured and 1 was shot in the mouth. Federal prosecutors secured convictions in 2023 and 2024, and the convicted deputies received federal prison sentences. These are matters of federal court record. What is important to state clearly, the classification dispute in the Cameron case, where 3 independent pathologists said homicide and the official ruling said undetermined, has never been formally resolved. The case remains closed at the state level. No independent review of Dr. Turner's office was publicly convened following the Cameron findings. Dr. Turner retained her position as Chief Medical Examiner. These are documented facts, not disputed claims. Whether any of this constitutes misconduct by Dr. Turner specifically is not established by available public reporting, and it is not asserted in this narration. She has not been criminally charged in connection with any ruling. The question being documented here is institutional. When an official's prior ruling is publicly contested by 3 independent experts and the deputy that ruling benefited is later federally convicted of unrelated civil rights crimes, what review mechanisms, if any, does the state have, and were they used? The public record suggests they were not. In September 2025, Trey Reed, a 21-year-old black student at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, was found hanging from a tree on campus, according to regional reporting. Local authorities and the state medical examiner's office ruled his death self-inflicted. Reed's family disputed that finding, retained Ben Crump, and commissioned an independent autopsy reportedly funded by Colin Kaepernick. As of available public reporting, the results of that independent autopsy have not been released publicly. As the host notes in this episode, and as this narration preserves, the state's ruling in the Reed case has not been publicly contradicted by an outside pathologist. This is a factual distinction from the Cameron case, where 3 independent experts did publicly contest the official finding. The Reed family's skepticism of the official ruling is a documented fact. Whether that skepticism is supported by forensic evidence is, as of available reporting, unknown. Advocates have also publicly connected a 2022 death. 13-year-old Shannon Wilson, a black boy whose death was ruled accidental drowning, reportedly without an autopsy, to the broader pattern. The host in this episode explicitly flags that no publicly confirmed documentation links Dr. Turner's office directly to the Wilson case. That distinction is material and preserved here. The Wilson family has made public allegations that his body was mishandled, including claims it was embalmed without consent. These allegations are reported as family claims and have not been confirmed by independent reporting as of available records. Because grand jury proceedings are a recurring procedural element in this episode, some general context is warranted. A grand jury is a panel of citizens convened to determine whether probable cause exists to bring criminal charges. In Mississippi, as in most states, grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret. Witnesses testify, evidence is presented, and deliberations occur without public access. A district attorney presents evidence. No defense attorney participates. The grand jury returns either a true bill, indictment, or a no bill, declining to charge. Prosecutors are not required to publicly announce when a grand jury is convened, when it will meet, or what timeline applies. The secrecy of grand jury proceedings is a feature of the system, not an anomaly. It is designed to protect both the integrity of the investigation and the reputations of individuals who might be investigated but not charged. In active cases, it is standard practice for all related evidence, including autopsy results, to be sealed until the grand jury process concludes. This context does not resolve the credibility questions the Wells family and their attorney have raised. It does mean that the absence of a public timeline or public disclosure of results is legally standard, not inherently suspicious. As of available public reporting, the following key facts remain unknown: the official cause of death in Nolan Wells's case, the contents of the state's toxicology results, whether the state's and independent examiner's findings are consistent or divergent, the results of the technology company subpoenas, the timeline for grand jury proceedings, and whether any independent review of the medical examiner's office has been initiated. The case is active, unresolved, and under investigation.